Good morning, welcome back. Lovely to see you. On behalf of St. Katherine Greek Orthodox Church and the site of Ireland and Locust, we welcome you. Before we get started, we just wanted to, again, you have a list of reminders and that you received yesterday. We will this morning be having a short break and breakfast around 9:30, bagels, muffins, and such, and coffee. So please, we'll have a chance to go next door again and have a break midway through. Other than that, we appreciate so far all the donations we've received. Thank you so much. Please know that this is going towards future retreats, and we want to be able to bring this back to our community, and it's because of your giving hearts that we're going to be able to do this again. So thank you very, very much. Other than that, we're going to be sending you this little gift. In addition to the little icons that you have inside your folder, the bookmarkers, we're going to also be emailing everybody a PDF of John Chrysostom's Upbringing of Children that Father so kindly provided to us, and it's going to be very much worth a read after the fact, so please look for that email from us. We are streaming, so guess what? You get to listen to this, whenever you want to. It will be released to everybody, so please refer back to it. And Father, you would so kindly.
Please rise for a prayer. In the name of the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit, amen. O heavenly King, O come, the Spirit of truth, which in all places dwells all things, treasure good things, and giver of life. Come and abide in us and cleanse them all, stay of thy goodness, save our souls. Bless you and enjoy the presentation. Father Josiah.
Good morning to you all. I hope you've had your morning coffee and you are ready for some discussion of the good wife. I have to make a few preliminary comments. First is to ask your patient endurance of me this morning. I woke up about 4 o'clock in the morning with the most incredible migraine headache. And I still have it. I think it's going away. But if I'm frowning, I'm not mad at you. It's nothing personal. So don't misread my frowns or my bending my eyes. Also, last night at the soup, a number of you told me you were having some difficulty hearing me. And before I started this session, I really want to make sure everybody is in a place where you can hear well. Can everyone hear what I'm saying? Yes? Everyone in the back too? Everything's fine? Okay, bravo. Well, I encouraged the wives last night to be gracious to their husbands, and not to poke them and prod them in the middle of the talks. And now I'm going to ask the same for the husbands, because we're turning from a discussion of the good husband to a discussion of the good wife. And remember, we're laying out beautiful examples from the scriptures for the lives of the saints, an ideal that none of us live up to. So let's be gracious. Let's be gracious this morning as well. I presented my comments on the good husband under 5 basic umbrellas. I want to approach the good wife the same way and focus on one primarily, as I did last night. So in discussing the role of the good wife, I start usually with a discussion of the wife in creation as a helpmate to root our understanding of the relationship and the distinction, the relationship of a woman to a man, and the distinction between a wife and a husband by creation. Then I like to talk about the woman as a homemaker or a manager of the domestic sphere. I like to talk about the woman as the heart of the family and as a healing drug. This is a wonderful image that the church fathers give us, the wife as the lover and the healing drug. She's literally called the pharmakon of her husband. And then at the end, the wife is a faithful friend. As I was reviewing my notes this morning with one eye open, I thought I would begin by focusing on the good wife as the heart of the family. So if that's all right with you, I'll do that. I'm going to go until 9 o'clock. At 9 o'clock, I'm going to stop. And we'll have from 9 until 9:30 to have questions and answers about this. We'll have our break. And then when we come back, we will change to our last topic, which is parenting, the sacred task of raising children. Okay. We have the very accomplished timekeeper who's going to keep me on track. I guess 9 o'clock also. So the good wife as the heart of the family, in the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Good women have the great consolation of the most beautiful example of the Mother of God. And the Mother of God was a cultivator of her own heart. The woman wants to learn how to be a big heart and to cultivate the hearts of her family. She has nothing better than to do than study and imitate the life of the Mother of God. In St. Peter's words, in his first epistle, he describes the great gift of what I would call the feminine mystique, the feminine giftedness and power of the inner person. For instance, in 1 Peter 3, St. Peter is describing a situation in which a wife has a very difficult marriage. And she has a husband who, in St. Peter's words, is not obedient to the Lord. And he gives very practical, the great apostle gives very practical counsel to the wife on what to do when you have a husband who is not faithful to God. And he says that the good wife can win her husband without a word. The good wife can win her husband without a word by her gentle and seemly disposition, by her quiet inner person. This is an incredible comment. How do you actually alter a man's life? How can you actually take a man who's off the rails and bring him back and influence him for good? And St. Peter says that a good wife can do this. And it's not done with words. It's done with a quality, a very unique feminine quality, which is the quiet disposition of her humble heart, of her inner spirit, which is precious in the sight of God. Peter also appeals to incredible people, wives in the past, like Sarah. And he says that Sarah called Abraham her Lord, and was not afraid with any fear whatsoever to be his faithful wife, even when it was difficult. And that women today can follow their good example if they trust God without having any fear. There is this very unique quality, and the Mother of God had this incredible disposition which is able to bend the will of a rebellious man and alter a male attitude. The Virgin did not pine after masculinity, like the feminists of today do. The Most Holy Theotokos, Spania, did not reject her feminine power in order to embrace an externalized masculine model of significance and being. Instead, she modeled for the whole church the qualities of the feminine perfectly. She became the bride of Christ, the mother of all the faithful, and the ultimate homemaker, not making just a domestic residence holy, but she filled God's house with her fragrance and her beauty, and she continues to do that. When we come into the temple of the Lord, on all our temples, she sets the tone. We come into the church and we gaze at her as you do here. She spreads her inner fragrance in the church and calls us to have a certain disposition towards God. She presides over all Christians as a model and as an example of authentic Christian life. Her life is really a template for our monks and nuns, not just for the nuns. This is why she's not only honored and her life intimately studied in our female monasteries and our convents, but in the male monasteries as well. How many of you have visited the Holy Mount? Have any of you ever gone on pilgrimage to Mount Athos? Well, looks like we need to organize a pilgrimage. Mount Athos has 20 major what are called ruling monasteries there. It has hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of smaller monasteries and skeets, cells, and things like that. But in the major monasteries, all of those monasteries have in them an icon of the Mother of God. And she's dressed as a nun, as an abbess, in fact. She's holding an abbatial staff. And she's standing, full figure, and she's standing upon the Holy Mountain. Under her feet is Mount Athos, and it has all the monasteries on it. And she's depicted this way in the icon because she is considered by the monks. Remember, Mount Athos is a peninsula on which women are not allowed to tread, except for the woman. And the woman doesn't just live there, she rules there. The men bow to her. The men consider her life to be supreme, and that all the abbots there consider her to be the ultimate abbess themselves. She has been the model not just for men, but not just for women naturally, but also for men. And she functions really as the heart, a model of the true heart. And if we can acquire that, if a Christian woman can acquire the heart of the Mother of God, she can function in a very grace-giving way, a very powerful way. The most pure virgin didn't stomp her feet and pout because she wasn't an apostle. Pania did not claim oppression and injustice and level accusations of prejudice against the apostles and the bishops and the priests of the church because she wasn't able to serve the Holy Eucharist or lead the divine liturgy. She honored the apostles as the successors of her son's priesthood on the earth. And she subsequently became everything to them. She became the very heart of the apostolic community. When she reposed, when her chemesis took place, all of the apostles came and they wept their eyes out like babies. She was everything to them, but she was uniquely a woman. She didn't buy this nonsense that has been foisted on our society by the feminist movement, that the only thing that's really significant is the public sphere. And that if you aren't working in the public sphere and you aren't obtaining a check that's exactly equal to a man's check, you're really not doing much. She didn't accept those perspectives, those standards. Instead, she knew that she had a unique calling as a woman, and she wasn't stupid enough to measure her significance in a male model. I've always found it just heartbreaking to see what happened when I was young in the triumph of the feminist movement in our culture. Women stopped dressing like women. And what did they do? Well, they started wearing suits. They even put shoulder pads on their suits to look like they had big masculine shoulders. And some of them even wore ties. And I thought to myself, that's freedom. Move to the public sphere, abandon the home, give up child rearing, and dress like a man, and call it liberation. The Mother of God knew much better than that. She shows us how to live from the interior life. She was the spiritual mother of the whole church, and is. She was the spiritual mother of the apostles. She's always in the middle of the gathered Christian community. She taught everyone how to truly love her Son, how to develop an interior life of holiness, how to make prayer supreme and the most noble human task, how to place love for God and for men above everything else, and how to live from the heart. She was a heart-focused person, and any woman who can develop that disposition will influence and raise the quality of life in her own house. The heart of the Virgin Mary is mentioned in the scriptures many places. She studied her own heart. She was an interior person, and she sought to purify it. She speaks about her heart and her inner person in these words. She says, "My spirit rejoices in God my Savior." The scriptures tell us that beholding the miracle of the incarnation and the adoration of the shepherds and the praise of the angels, she didn't run off and announce what she had seen, but rather it says that she, quote, treasured up all of these things, pondering them in her heart. She lived there. She was an interior person. The things that she saw and experienced on the outside, she tucked away. She constantly expanded it. Her heart became bigger and bigger and bigger, not just to have her Son, but to have all of her relatives, and then eventually all of the apostles and the whole church. The larger your heart becomes, the more people you can put inside. Sadly for us, sometimes our hearts are too small. We just don't have any room. We can't get anyone in there. Sometimes we can't even get our spouse in there. But God's calling us to enlarge our hearts, to make our hearts, stretch them open, so that we can actually have them open wide to our whole families, and even more to our neighbors and to our fellow parishioners. St. Paul had this experience happen to him. St. Paul had a transformation in his life in which Jesus radically altered his heart. He was able to write to his spiritual children, the Corinthians, and he said, "My heart is open wide to you. I have you all in my heart," he said. That's how big he had become. This is our goal. This is our goal, to be heart-centered people like the Mother of God, to treasure up life in there, to pay attention to it, and to increase it as we live together in marriage. It should be getting larger. We should be able to keep more in it, with the ultimate goal, one day, of being completely 100% heart. That's what we want to be. This same phrase about treasuring up things in her heart, pondering them in her heart, is repeated later in the gospel narrative, after the event surrounding the visit of the Holy Family to Jerusalem, when Jesus was 12 years old. After finding Jesus in the temple, after he had been missing for several days, the scriptures say, "And he went down with them, and he came to Nazareth, and he continued in subjection to them, and his mother treasured all of these things up in her heart." This is just how she lived. The things she saw her Son doing, she took notice. She meditated upon them, and she packed them away in her inner person. This treasuring up, this cultivation of the inner person, is what all Christians are trying to accomplish, what enables us to be bearing fruit for God. And without it, really, we only offer bad fruit. Jesus teaches us this. He says, "The good man, out of the good treasure of his heart, brings forth what is good. And the evil man out of the evil treasure brings forth what is evil. For the mouth speaks from that which fills the heart. This is the core. And what's in there, if it's well cared for, produces beautiful fruits. But if it's neglected, if the heart is neglected, what will come forth is horror. It's horror. This is the only way to love God, with our hearts, that is. And it's the key to escaping an empty formalism, a bogus external religion, which St. Paul says has no power at all. The Holy Virgin is the great heart of the Church, and good wives who are seeking to imitate her example, they function as the hearts of their families. She was the heart of the apostles. She was the one that they depended on. And the wife in the home, if she cultivates her heart, she functions the same way. The spirit of the Holy Virgin is the feminine spirit of the refined spiritual life, the cultivation of the inner person, the focus on the heart engaged in the war to love God and to defeat interior evil where it needs to be defeated most. St. Thalasios in the Theologia, he says this, he says, woman, as woman, symbolizes the soul engaged in ascetic practice. Through union with it, the intellect begets its virtues. This is the contribution, the unique contribution that a wife can bring. She cultivates the heart of the family itself. She expresses her God-given and outrageously beautiful feminine spirit by first taking care of her own heart, and from that position she assists her husband and her children in taking care of their hearts. This happens in many ways. I'm going to suggest a few that I think are common enough that they become normative for devout wives. I'd say first that the woman, the wife, the good wife, is a cultivator of holiness in every family member. She's the one who notices, for instance, the first appearances of selfishness in children. That's what the mother does. The dad might notice eventually, especially if it starts to bother him. In fact, I have in my 31 years of living with my wife, I've watched this over and over and over again with my children. A few times I've even been privy to some of the first interactions between my wife and the little ones when my wife notices the first kind of outbreak of tremendous self-centeredness or something like that. They're young. I remember my daughter Olivia, who's almost 10 now, when she was younger, when she was, I think, 4, my little daughter had done something that my wife thought was serious enough to confess. And it happened in front of me. I was sitting on the couch, probably reading, and not paying too much attention. But I heard this going on, and it pulled me in, so I began to observe. My wife worked with my little Olivia. She talked her through why what she had just done was not good and should not be done again. She helped her to apologize because she had done this to someone else in the family. And then she worked with her through my daughter's embarrassment to get her to come over to me to confess it. And I remember holding my little princess on my knee, and I heard her confession as she kind of struggled to tell me what she had done. And I asked her a few questions about it. And then I kissed her and I let her go. Well, the good wife was not done. She was not done. She was appreciative that I had gone that far, but she was not satisfied that that was as far as it should have gone. So from the kitchen, I hear this question directed to me. Sweetheart, did you take her for absolution? And I discerned at that moment that the good wife had judged that this was time for the real deal. Not just a little apology, but she had decided that it was time for my daughter to start her confessional life. That it was something that was a big enough deal. My daughter her conscience was involved with it. And when you see a child develop a conscience, it's time to help that child start to develop a confessional life. I didn't notice that, but my wife did. Because she's the one who's watching so carefully. So I walked over to my chapel outside of the rectory. I walked outside to my chapel, and I put on my Epitrachelion, and my little princess came out, and we did the real deal. And she, at almost 5 years of age, started her little beautiful confessional life. And when we returned to the kitchen, the good wife had arranged a cheering party for the newly confessed princess. So she had some of the other kids there, and they said, "You made your first confession, and oh my gosh, if you confess your sins, they're forgiven. That means your heart is white. Let's dance." And they did a little dance, and I was amazed. I was amazed at the care. I was amazed at the care that my wife was taking to help her daughter understand the significance of what she had done, and take the time to walk her through the steps to really grasp it, to understand why it would have been better to do something else, more consistent with her love for God. And then showed her in detail what to do when you make a mistake, how to actually process this, and then to be super happy about it when you fix it. I can promise you that would never have happened if my wife wasn't. It was just up to me. Frankly, I didn't even notice, and I wouldn't have noticed. Maybe later, if there was really screaming going on or something, then I would have said, "Gosh, I can't even read," and I would have got up and I said, "What's going on around here? Get in here, sit down. What did you do? What did you do? What did you do?" I wouldn't have done. It would have taken a long time. The good wife, as the heart of the family, becoming a cultivator of holiness with her sensitivity, her God-given sensitivity. She's also, I would call her, the good wife, the dignifier. This is another aspect of being the heart of the family. The good wife is the dignifier. She exercises a powerful censorship in the house. Very powerful censorship over music, television, conversation, manners, and dress, and many more things. Hers is the voice of reason, constantly infusing the little things of life with their true spiritual value and helping everyone, sometimes even the husband, make the proper judgments about what is dignified and the importance of the little things. She's the one who reminds everybody that life is basically just little things, a collection of little things that end up producing a big life. They all add up to something good or bad, beautiful or ugly. And in the process of dignifying the family, she has to endure a lot of things. She has to endure burps, farts, groans, the horror of teenage dressing. Yes, I have stuck in my head something that my wife has said from the kitchen many times. Upon seeing a teenage son walk upstairs from the basement. I have a basement in my house, thank God. It's a dry basement, it's about 1,200 square feet. And when my first son, who's 29 now, when he was first 13, I decided that the basement was a God-given gift for teenagers. I couldn't sleep anymore. They were driving me crazy. And so we fixed up our basement, and then it's been our practice at our house. As soon as you hit the teenage years, down to the basement, please. That's your place. Go down there and let me sleep. Well, they would often come up, of course, for school, etc. And I would hear this coming from the kitchen from my wife. "Your pants has fallen down." She would say it like that to tease them, even in the bad English, because their pants, sometimes those teenagers, they don't know where the belt goes. They don't know how the pants goes. So whenever she would see them, she'd just laugh at them. "Your pants are falling down again. Mom, you told me that yesterday. I'm telling it to you again. Your pants just falling down." This is what a wife can do. She can dignify. She helps all of the family live in a more respectful way. She also functions as the compassion builder. She cultivates holiness, she dignifies life, she helps us to live in a dignified way, and she also nourishes compassion. She helps her husband and children understand the plight of other people. She's the one that's constantly activating charity in the home, whether it's cooking for a needy family, arranging the family to serve the homeless, visiting the sick in the hospital, tending to the sick in the house itself. The good wife is the heart of family almsgiving. Really, she's the fountain of charity. She's the one who relates the information of who is sick, who is in need. She teaches the husband and children not to be concerned only for themselves, but for each other, and for the parish community, and for the neighborhood. She's the sympathizer. There's a beautiful letter that St. John Chrysostom wrote near the end of his life. He wrote this letter to a young widow who had lost her very wonderful husband, who was very close to St. John. And St. John encouraged her and praised her about a lot of things and gave her suggestions on how to live. But in that letter, one of the things he describes is the unique nature of the feminine soul, how sensitive to suffering the feminine soul is, and how important that heart sensitivity is in a family. These are his words. He says, "The female sex is far more apt to be sensitive to suffering." This is why when our Lord was suffering, the apostles were nowhere to be found. Nowhere. They ran for their lives. It was the Mother of God, St. Mary Magdalene, who stayed there, and St. Veronica, whose gospel we read just recently, kept near him, supported him. The good wife feels the pain of everyone in the family, and she bears it to health. She listens to her husband's trials, to his tribulations at work. She prays for him when he faces challenging circumstances. She encourages him by reminding him how thankful the family is for his effort. When one member of the family is sick, she's the primary caregiver, obtaining and administering medicines, arranging doctor visits, keeping vigil at bedsides, cleaning up messes, rubbing the heads and the backs of the ailing. Her sensitivity to suffering establishes her functionally as the nurse of the house. This is what a good wife does, and it's an amazing thing to witness. I have consistently been blown away by what my wife has been able to do by the sensitivity of her own heart. How many nights she's able to get out of bed, to be there when a child's sick. It's an amazing thing. I just sleep through. I just sleep through. The good wife is also, I would call her the reconciler. She's also the reconciler. All of these things are just subcategories of how she functions as the heart of the family. She's the one who constantly moderates opinions, reminds the children that they are to be each other's best friends. I can't tell you how many times I've heard my wife say to my children, when they're fussing, she goes, "You better work this out because you are each other's best friends and you're going to be each other's best friends forever." Got it? Yeah. She cultivates that, but she teaches them how to think about each other and how important it is not to allow bad feelings to stay. She demands humility. She demands reconciliation. She teaches everyone how to say, "I forgive you, please forgive me, I love you." She's the one who really works to kill judgment in the home. She has no place. She knows how much judgment is to be feared, and how if it's unchecked, it will cause a conflagration and burn up the house itself. She doesn't tolerate alienation. She does her work to get to the bottom of squabbles. Whatever she can't handle, she brings to the husband, and together they bring it to resolution. This role as the reconciler is the role that births peace in the house. If the good wife doesn't embrace the sacred task of reconciling all, then anger can fester and it can steal joy right from the house. A house can become a place of controversy. Most anger, of course, is the fruit of judgment and is very demonic. But the good wife reminds all that when we judge, we're joining ourselves actually to the evil one. You know, our Savior said something very beautiful about this ministry, about the whole economy of salvation. He said, "I did not come to judge the world." Yes, he is the judge of the world, but that's not why he came. He said, "I did not come to judge the world, I came to save it." And when we actually function as judges, when we are judging people and each other, we actually at that moment are not collaborating with Jesus in his cause at all. we're actually doing the very thing he said he did not come to do, that he's not interested in doing. In fact, we call the evil one, the Diabolos, the accuser. So when we judge, we're actually uniting ourselves to the devil. We're actually promoting his cause, which is opposing the cause of Christ. And the good wife who has a heart-centered life and is teaching people to work from the heart is the one who squashes judgment and nourishes a collaboration with Jesus to spread forgiveness and to spread love. If we could fix in our heads, that every one of us has within ourselves as a gift from God, his own love spread abroad in us. This is St. Paul's words in Romans 5. He says that God hath shed his love abroad in our hearts by the Holy Spirit. We have that. I imagine it as though he's given us a pail. We all have a pail and it's full of his love. And we're supposed to carry it. We're supposed to carry it around each day. And every time we meet someone, we're supposed to scoop some up and smush it right on. Oh, rub it all over their heads, all over their arms. That's what we're supposed to do. That's how we become agents of God's love in society. And don't forget, brothers and sisters. I mean, I know you all want your faith to grow. You're serious because you're here Friday night and Saturday morning to learn your faith. You want your parishes to thrive. The number one quality for a church to grow is hot love. Number one, it's irresistible. I go all over the country speaking about church growth all the time, usually about catechism, because I live in an area where we just have a lot of catechumens. Every year we have a lot of catechumens. Half of my parish, like 350 of the people that are active in my parish, have actually gone through catechism and been baptized in the church. And so I get all sorts of questions about this. And I always am asked, what if the recipe? How is it that you can get a lot of catechumens in your church? I have 40 right now, and it's not unusual. And I tell them, first I tell them I have no bloody idea. It's not like we have a great strategy. But then it only takes a few seconds for me to think. And it's very clear to me that we were set on a good course by our founders, many of whom carried pails. They really did. They carried pails of love. They had the love of God in their life, and they cherished it, and they shared it. One of them, God rest her soul, her name is Vera. She and her husband, Nick, they were married forever. We buried them in their mid-80s. Maybe 10 years ago now. I can't believe it. God rest their souls. Vera had one eye on the altar at all times, and one eye on any visitor who would come. I don't know how she did it, but if you were a visitor to the church, she would find you. And at the end of the liturgy, you were going to see her, and she was going to touch you. Didn't matter who you were, didn't matter if you were covered with tattoos and you had like rings hanging out your nose. We get a lot of that actually. Very normal actually in my state. But she would find you, she's going to touch you, and then she's not going to let you go. So she's going to walk with you from the church to the hall. She's going to take you to get food. She's going to introduce you to a few people. She's going to absolutely make sure that you see one of the priests there, myself or one of the other priests. And then she's going to kiss you, and then you're free to go. This is just how it was. This is just how she lived. And it wasn't now and then. It was every single liturgy. Her husband would come to church, Nick, would come to church with pockets full of candy every single Sunday. And then he would wander through the hall and he would greet this child and that child. And he would ask, how the Lakers do. And, oh yeah, were you listening in church today? Oh, good boy. And he'd always go home with no candy. So he'd come with candy. This is just how the couple was. And they weren't that unique. There were other couples who did this too. I'm not saying it was just them. But that was what we learned. That's what when our church was founded. I had to say there was one thing that has really helped. It's this. These people believed that the love of God was real and it was to be shared. And that is exactly That is exactly what Jesus says is the ultimate apologetic, the ultimate proof to people who aren't believers that he's real. These are his words. This is from John 13. He says, by this, all men will know that you are my disciples, if you have love one for another. The ultimate proof. It's what answers the atheist's claims. The most incredible things in life can't be seen concretely. They're not material. The materialists have no explanation for love. All the things that really motivate us. Truth, beauty, love, reason. None of them are material. And they're the most important things in life. And when people see it, and it's unexplainable. The selflessness is unexplainable. It is a powerful witness to the reality of God. We can have the most beautiful churches, most beautiful choirs, great preaching, but if the church is loveless, no one's coming. No growth is going to happen. Who would want to go there? Who would want to go there? This is very much the call of the good woman, the call of the good wife. She makes us live here. She keeps us to stay in our heart. Of course, if she's cultivating her own heart, she's going to also carry with her a tremendous sympathy for her husband. I once heard a really hilarious description from Dr. Laura Schlesinger. And you know that woman, Dr. Laura? She used to be on the radio a lot. I'm not sure if she's still on the radio anymore. She published a lot of books like How to Properly Care for and Feed Your Husband and stuff like that. Incredible woman. She has this story she tells called the Perfect Husband Shopping Center. It goes like this. You're there to pick the perfect husband. Okay? You're there to pick the perfect husband. And it's laid out on 5 floors. Okay? You come into the shopping center, it's 5 floors. With the positive attributes increasing as you go higher on the floors. Okay? So the only rule is that once you go up a floor, there's no going back. So you're going to pick a husband from these floors, and they get better the higher you go. But you have to agree, as you're going higher, there's no going back. So you go to the first floor, and the first floor has for sale husbands who are both devout and have a good job. They're devout and they have a good job. That's pretty good. Sheesh. Be content and grab one from that floor. No, let's go on to the second floor. They're like, well, if every floor gets better, let's just go on to the next floor. They go to the next floor and it's devout, good job, and these husbands also love kids. Wow. Of course, these are more expensive. And the wife thinks, well, I wonder what's on the third floor. So they go up to the third floor, and these are husbands who are devout, a good job, love kids, and very good looking. Wow! Third floor is going to be bad. And now the women are on a roll. So they go to the fourth floor, and there they find husbands who are devout, they have a good job, they love kids, they're very good looking, and they're selfless. So they're wondering, what in the world? Maybe we should just take this floor, be content. But they're like, what could possibly be on the 5th floor? So they go up to the 5th floor, and when they get to the 5th floor, there's a sign that reads, this floor is just to prove that women are impossible to please. Oh my gosh, don't be like that. Don't be like that. Oh my gosh. For men who have wives who never stop nagging, who are always finding something to complain about and to fight about, who criticize them relentlessly, really, it hurts badly. It hurts badly. And the good wife who is a heart, who works from the heart, it's not consonant with having a big heart. When you have a big heart, you're not always picky. You're not always nagging. And when you nag, which is a particularly feminine vice, forgive me. There are particular masculine vices too, but one of the particular feminine vices is nagging. And when women nag too much, they really change what marriage is for men. I heard it put this way, that men conclude when they're being nagged that marriage has turned into a three-ring circus. First comes the engagement ring, then comes the wedding ring, then comes the suffer ring. Yes, it's better to live in the corner of a roof than share a house with a quarrelsome wife. Proverbs 21:9. A quarrelsome wife is like a constant dripping on a rainy day. Restraining her is like restraining the wind or grasping oil with your hand. Proverbs 27. Better to live on the corner of a roof than share a house with a quarrelsome wife. Proverbs 24:24. Which, by the way, is an exact repeat of the first one. You ever found a scripture passage that is an exact repeat? Obviously, this was a problem. Better to live in a desert than with a quarrelsome and ill-tempered wife. Proverbs 21:19. A foolish son is his father's ruin, and a quarrelsome wife is like a constant dripping. Proverbs 19:13. 5 Proverbs exclusively devoted to this particular feminine vice, which is the opposite of being a large one: nagging and criticism. Remember when the Israelites were in the wilderness? God had delivered them miraculously from slavery in Egypt. He had crushed Pharaoh. He had taken them through the Red Sea miraculously, and they were in the wilderness on the way to the Promised Land. There was one great sin during those 40 years that they repeated over and over again, something that upset the Lord more than anything else. You know what it was? Complaining. Complaining. Whining. We often don't think whining as a sin, but all these things I'm just quoting to you make it very clear. Nagging is just a form of whining. And whining is an expression of discontent and lack of trust in God. We whine when we're thinking something's wrong here. My husband is not doing what I want, and therefore this must not be God's will. Big mistake. Big mistake. That's why the Lord was so bothered by it. The Lord was so bothered by the Israelite whining and complaining because they weren't trusting him. When you trust God, you don't take it upon yourself to judge his providence on what he arranges in your life. It's not up to us to decide what's going to come today. It's up to us to decide if we're going to believe that what comes is blessed or not. There's a reason that the Lord has his hand like that on the icon. And he's looking right at you with his magnificent eyes, and he has his hand out blessing you. It's to convey to you his disposition, that he loves you and wants to bless you, and also to remind you, nothing comes into your life, nothing, without going through those fingers. It goes through the fingers and into your life. So you can accept it and believe it or not. If you accept it and believe it, you're not going to whine about it. You may be confused about it. You may not know why it's there, but then that expresses itself in prayer. Lord, what's going on? Why did you send me today this husband who won't do what I need him to do? That is what you should say. That's the kind of talking you should do. It's to God, not to your husband. If, in fact, we lose our peace and we start nagging, we start criticizing, we start henpecking, which is only going to make matters worse. No husband corrects his life because his wife is nagging him. He may do what she wants, but he's secretly resolving to make it twice as bad the next day. He is. He's not going to give in to that. And he shouldn't give in to that. It's just horrible. It's just horrible. It's overcome, this kind of whining is overcome by trust in God. Believing that the purpose of my life is not to have everything go my way. That's a recipe for going to hell. No, we should say, well, we trust God that he works all things together for good for those who love him. This is what we believe. He's going to arrange just the right amount of mess for me each day. And he's going to send the right amount of mess, exactly as he wants it to be. And then we'll be able to say, with St. James, consider it all joy when you encounter various trials. Then we'll be able to say that if we believe, if we have trust, because we know He's working on us. And the only way to actually become what He wants us to become is to become beautiful. You have to, in order to become beautiful, you need difficulties. You're gold. You're the image of God, but you're not pure yet. You're like an icon, a beautiful icon that was painted in the 6th century, but it's had candles burning in front of it for 1,400 years, and it's covered with black soot, right? The icon's there, the image is there by creation. By our baptism, the image has been renewed, but there's a lot of us, a lot of our soot. The only way it gets clean is by those brush strokes, the brush strokes of difficulty, the acidic reality of living with trials and trusting God through them and learning to love through them. This is how we become beautiful, and it's very important for a wife who's cultivating her heart and helping everyone in the family to do that, to apply it to herself and not to set it aside in order to nag. Let me conclude with one more idea, and that is that the good wife, as such, who's cultivating her own interior life and living from her heart, she's able to function like a thermostat, a spiritual thermostat in her house. She can exercise an incredible influence for good over her husband and children. She can be like that incredible mom, the mother of the 7 Maccabean martyrs, Salome. You can read about her life in the Old Testament, 4th Maccabees, and also in 2nd Maccabees chapter 7. This total awe-inspiring story is the story of a period of time when the Jews were under the pagan Greeks who were imposing Greek paganism upon Judea and demanding that believers not worship God anymore, but the idols, and throw away their Mosaic way of life. And she stood next to her sons. They were all arrested, including their spiritual father, Eleazar. They were all arrested, and they had demands put upon them to break God's law. And one by one, the sons were martyred. And she stood next to each one and talked with her sons and encouraged them to make the right choice, to choose their souls, to choose to fear God rather than a powerful man. And one by one, they were martyred. And she watched all 7 of her sons be martyred. And then she herself was martyred. That right there is a beautiful scriptural example of a woman, Solomonia, who had such a big heart that she was able actually to dial her whole family into God. She set the temperature. She communicated her heart disposition of fidelity to God, and all of her sons were able to become these incredible saints and faithful to God just because of her own love. This is what a good wife can actually do if she embraces the high calling of being a wife and a mother. If she considers those things to be the highest calling of all, which of course would set her apart immediately from the rush of this world, which doesn't respect those things. For us, they're the most important things of all. Okay. Questions? Good morning.
So I was going to ask this yesterday, but I suppose there's today's because I've seen those videos from the soul. The problem of defending your spouse. So, Christ says it's blessed if we, do not defend ourselves, but if our spouse is experiencing some kind of malice or persecution or something like that. What's the, the proper way to, kind of handle that? Because, when I ask someone, being me or my kind of instinct is, I don't like that.
Yes, sure.
My wife is the
Yes. Yes, that's a wonderful question. That's a wonderful question. The question, if I'm understanding it correctly, is what would be the role of a husband or even a man in any relation in the defense of his wife if she was being attacked or accused or persecuted or what have you? In general, this is the glory of any man, is to defend any woman. That's how we live. Our way of life honors the presence of woman uniquely. And that means that has basic expressions in life, like there's just many things we don't say or do in the presence of a woman, period. Period. We're careful with how we speak. We're careful with how we act. We're careful with how we look at them. One of the most important ways to protect a woman is to treat her as a person and not as a thing, which is very, very difficult for men. Because there's nothing more beautiful in the created world for most men than a feminine form. I remember once one of my sons, one of my grown sons, and I were having a conversation about the beauty of creation and hiking in some of our mountains. You know, California is just full of the most incredible mountains. We have 40 mountain peaks above 10,000 feet, and we have 3 above 14,000 feet. Just, it's amazing, absolutely amazing. And we were talking, and he was saying, it's the most beautiful thing in the whole world. And he looks at me, he said, actually, almost the most beautiful thing. And I looked at him and said, and the most beautiful thing is? And he goes, woman. I said, agreed, absolutely agreed. So, one of the ways that we have to protect our wives, and all women, is by treating the most beautiful of God's creation with dignity as people, precious people. Which means that we really can't, we must set ourselves apart from degrading, selfish, possessive viewing, which is what's behind, of course, the whole pornography addiction. One of the things I often say to men who are confessing their pornography addictions, and I mentioned the word last night, epidemic. I chose that word intentionally. We are in an epidemic. One of the things I say is, I said, do you recognize that? That could be your sister. That is someone's daughter, someone's sister, someone's cousin. If you think of it that way, if you inject reality of that this is a person made by God, loved by God, then what you're doing by possessing them with your eyes out of pure selfishness is it takes on the black character that it really has. So this is one of the things that we should be very careful about in defending women from being treated as they are today, as just objects for man's satisfaction. Unfortunately, that is the fruit of the sexual revolution since the early 60s. It's absolutely the fruit of the birth control pill. As soon as men had the dreams come true with the creation of the birth control pill, so that they could actually have their satisfaction with women without any responsibility, cutting the cord between the pleasure of conjugal union and children. As soon as that happened, women stopped just tanked. They just became things to be used, and that's exactly what they've become. This is horrible abuse. In general, we should always we should hold doors for women, even if women don't want to hold doors. These days, sometimes I've been criticized by a woman for holding the door for her in my state. So strange. So strange. But that's okay. Hold the door nonetheless. We hold doors for them. When we walk with them on the street, we always walk between the road and them. They should never be on the outside. They should always be on the inside of a man. When they speak, we should listen. We should stand. We should stand in the presence of a woman. When a woman comes into the room, and we should get up. We do this for elders, by the way, also older people who also have a unique status, not just women, but are older people too. When an older person comes in, we stop talking. We let them talk. We ask them to talk. This is basic chivalry, and we would never allow vulgarity to be bantered about in the presence of our wives. Many times I've confronted a man in public because of the way he's speaking. Many times. And sometimes it's almost become violent. because he's literally, I remember one time I was at a Starbucks with my wife, and two homosexual men were literally talking out loud about their most recent weekend escapades in detail, describing sodomy and who they were with, and it was grotesque. And I almost laughed. I almost laughed. We can't permit that. We should say, please, excuse me. There's a woman here. Please. And if they don't like that, then just say, please, go. Go. And if they won't, then we should leave. We should guard that which we love the most from that kind of defilement. Other questions? Please.
So university, you know that you are okay, and when a husband does psychological medical abuse,
Yes.
it becomes very tricky to really see where the line is. And then in my case, I go to some of the sites which I did with them. And unfortunately, my friends have been very impressed by there are people who are called covert narcissists.
Yes.
And they're because they're essentially from trauma means they're great for impressing everybody. And for the rest of these people, impressing everybody, they do so well. The people who are educated, smart, they have PhD, they could be spiritual, even they can't really see that they have been so impressed that when they so desperate to prove what's true and what's not true. People husbands like that or wives like that cause cognitive dissonance because it's intermediate abuse. They're nice and they're relevant and you don't even know when it's coming. And you are spending instead of peacefulness and paying for your emotional resources, kids who need money so much. When mother's psychological health is being bombarded, and it's frequent, it's not predictably, you anticipate how you may have unpredictably strong development. It actually puts you on kind of rock, there's nobody, because you just said defend you need to defend somebody. But when one of those women is alone, and there's no one to defend her, and truth is all entangled, and you know that it's there, but nobody believes you. It actually makes it harder. So in my case, it's better. So I'm given better mental health. Feel like I find a way how to get out of this situation, not to even hope that any of those people will understand until they go through that. Because people, all those people, trust their own senses when they are being impressed by those creative, desperate people. So please tell me, because since years like that, I become defending myself because I have no other choice. There's no one. What kind of people like that? Just priests who has seen my husband's eyes and they were able to really see what's going on. It makes them extremely lonely and more confused, more tired. Why I have to attend my exhausting attention to do with my kids. So I don't think it's if your husband became like your tricky enemy, pretending that he's not an enemy, it's so hard to raise kids, and I worry about how can I instill peacefulness in my kids when I have to like pretend this is my okay. They also have shame, so I ask them that if someone approaches you with something, don't say she's weird, don't say, oh, like, she's wrong. No. By doing so, you might actually trigger him in pain, trigger him in usage. Please answer the question about some men or women are so traumatized in childhood that they become all about their craving, about their egocentric ability to be good and impress others. And it's almost those empathic kind So prevention, if you have young kids, please tell them that don't have kids with men without helping church to choose husbands for you. Because it determines, even if you have a marriage, after marriage, if you are down until you completely, somebody should taste it and taste it out. It could be priest or a friend or a mother or maybe even yourself. But by choosing husband only through spiritual parts like this prevents emotional pain of future generation. Because I'm actually guilty of being so naive, by codependent, that by not carefully very well as somebody, I actually cause my children witness that horrible toxic.
Thank you for saying that.
So,
I'm amazed listening to you, and I feel we have many sorrows, many difficulties in marriage that are not easily fixed or even born. They're not even easily born. And often there is no quick solution and not any clear way to go. I'll tell you though, the most beautiful person I've ever met was a woman, she's proposed now, who lived in a very, very abusive marriage. But she wasn't destroyed. She wasn't destroyed. It became as horrible as it was. It became really the platform for her to become the most beautiful person. She found a way to lean on God and to be with God in that, and to develop her heart in such a way that her impact on her children, she had many children, even though their father was such a monster, the children came out beautiful. Amazing. And they all were devoted to her like there was no one in their life like her. So the grace of God, where Paul puts it this way, where sin grows, where sin abounds, grace superabounds. When we're feeling crushed by horrible things, that's when we have to keep our eyes open to find the grace of God, because He's with us in the midst of the fiery furnace. Right? The three youths were there, and then there was a fourth, right in the middle of the flames, dancing with them. We have to keep our eyes open for His presence. Sweetheart, you also made a very interesting comment about how important it is to form marriages. One of the talks I like to give to young people, not you all veteran marrieds like you, but kids who are like thinking about getting married, is a talk I call The Rules of Traditional Orthodox Courtship. And I have 12 basic steps, like 12 basic pieces of advice from the church on how to get married, because no one knows how to get married anymore. We used to, as a whole church, we used to help people very much. Priests would be involved, families would be involved, we'd be looking out for people. But today, a lot of our young people feel like they're on their own. They have to like make their contacts and make all these decisions privately, that kind of thing. Starting well is exceedingly important. If you start well, you can end up being as lucky as Father James Bowles. If you have young people who are interested, I have a PDF that I sent. Maybe Nicolette, I could give it to you on the steps for courtship that help kids know like how to move forward and how to find a happy match, something that's blessed. Do we have time for one more question? Is it 9:30 yet?
It's currently 9:20.
We have 10 minutes for more questions before we take our break.
If I could just ask you 2 questions. One is, are you allowed to talk, sign that personal copy of the consent? And to do that, that would be great at the time. Secondly, I just wanted to ask you about the biblical interpretation of the way marriage appears in the Bible, Old Testament and New Testament. Formula is there are 2 branches in the New Testament that don't exist. Thirdly, in marriage, priests, and also 20 for marriage. And I know that's one question, or an appropriate question to ask now. I mean, if you're Orthodox and married and non-Orthodox, or someone who you're not part of the church. Sure. So if you have 2 gay men and married, you have this couple to the difference. Sure. In our society. So
there's a lot there. There's a lot there. Wow. We have tremendous guidance. The Lord has given us tremendous guidance about marriage. And the church has codified that into basic disciplinary canons that explain how to contract a marriage, what marriages are legitimate and what aren't. The most important thing that Jesus asks us to do is to make a discernment about one of 2 fundamental paths of life. There are some people who are meant to be married, and there are some people who are not meant to be married. And that has to be discerned. And in any normal Christian society, any normal Orthodox society, both of those paths are well known. And there are opportunities for both paths. In our society, where we live, where we're such a small minority, and even our Orthodox communities, forgive me for saying it like this, I don't mean any offense, but we're not very normal Orthodox. We're just not. We're very Americanized, which means we're very materialist, and we don't have an appreciation for monastic life in this country. It's better today than it was 25 years ago, but it's still a very tenuous relationship for us in America. It's a nervous relationship, and it's not always healthy. In fact, it's often not healthy, the relationships between monasteries and churches. We have 70 monasteries in America. But normally, a normal Christian person growing up would know that it's important when they come to adulthood to make a decision between one of these 2 states of life. Many of you probably know the wonderful Russian Bishop St. John of San Francisco. Died in 1966. If you don't know him, find out about him. He's an incredible person, incredible saint. But he grew up, when he was little, he grew up in Russia before the communists came to power. He was born in 1896. He lived right next to a monastery, and he grew up playing soccer, since he was 5, on the fields of the monastery with the monks. He would play soccer, and the kids would grab him, and the monks would play around with him. And he'd tell stories of going to church and hiding in the monks' robes when he was little. There were 600 monks at that one monastery where he grew up. 600. I mean, just tons of his friends became monks and nuns. And some did, and some didn't. Some got married, but it was just normal. And you make that decision. And St. Paul says in 1 Corinthians 7, a beautiful text. St. Paul, who was this radical apostolic missionary who had given everything to Jesus. He considered everything else that he gave up. He said, "I consider it to be trash." He actually uses a word I can't say in church. He says, "I consider it all to be rubbish. I consider it all to be dumb." Sometimes we translate it. In comparison to the value of knowing Jesus, my Savior. He gave up everything. And he said in 1 Corinthians, he goes, "I wish everyone was as I myself am." Nevertheless, everyone has his own calling from God. One in this manner, and another from that. And then he goes on and describes marriage and monastic life in the rest of that chapter. So in a normal world, the discernment process starts on the big question. Should you become a nun or a monk, or should you become a married person? We have way, way, way too many people married who had never called to marriage in the first place. And the reason is they never had the opportunity to even take seriously the possibility of becoming a monk or a nun. They had wrong ideas about it. They didn't have a living witness of it. That was normal. And for Orthodoxy throughout history, it was normal for every family to have at least one monk or one nun. As a matter of fact, St. Athanasius the Great, no small figure in our lives, one of the greatest fathers ever. He says that it's very important for each family to have one. And he says one monk or nun can change the fabric of an entire family. You have someone from your own flesh who's like living day and night praying for you, non-stop, day and night. It's a tremendous blessing. So that is to be discerned. And then, if you are called to marriage, and by the way, you can be called to both, just so you know. Yes, you can be called to both, meaning you can be called in one part of your life to marriage, and maybe your spouse dies after 30 years of beautiful marriage, and then Jesus says, now I want you totally to give yourself to me and not have another marriage. You know, we have a lot of bishops in this country who have had that happen. Some of our bishops in this land, you know, we have 56 of them now. Some of the Orthodox bishops were married priests, but their presbyteros passed away. Now I'll tell you a beautiful story. One of our bishops, I won't tell you who it is, shouldn't probably. But he was a great married priest, really great married priest. And presbyter passed away. He ended up becoming a bishop. And the first time I knew him as a priest, and the first time I saw him as a bishop, I was kind of teasing him and making, fun of him, now he's, big bishop, and he was walking with his staff, and I looked at his staff and said, what is that? He took his wedding ring, and he melted it. I mean, it's still there, but he had it submerged in whatever that material is on the top of the staff. That's like a see-through gold. Anyway, on the top of the staff, so that he could kiss it all the time without people knowing what he was doing. Yeah, isn't that fantastic? So he's waiting to see Presbyterian again. And that love that they fashion is going to have some expression in the next life. But now he was called to become a monk and become a bishop. It was possible even in one lifetime to be called to both. You never know. I was at the grave last afternoon, just before I was with you last evening, out at the St. Anthony Monastery. And one of the reasons I wanted to visit there, even though it was for just a short time, was because I had some loved ones who were buried there that I haven't been able to visit their graves because they're from Southern California, but they came out here because they had friends and family and they loved the monastery and got buried here. And one of them is a man just like this, beautiful married life and beautiful children, and then at the end of his life, for the last month of his life, he became a monk. Yeah. So that's a huge discernment to make. And then if you're going to get married, to discern who the Lord wants for you, not just who you want. That's the next important step. Who does God want for me? Because marriage belongs to Him. He fashioned it. We have this completely backward idea in our culture today that somehow marriage was created by us, and that states can regulate it and change its definition. Marriage existed long before there ever was a state. Politics and formal nation states, way after the creation of marriage. Marriage is primal. Marriage is something that God fashioned from the beginning, and it can't be changed except by the author who made it. And He has His ways, and one of His ways is that His people who are baptized, who are sharing in the new life of the kingdom of God, only marry people who are baptized, sharing in the new life of the kingdom of God. There is no fellowship between light and darkness. And a believer has nothing in common, marriage-wise, with an unbeliever. St. Paul says in 2 Corinthians 6. And so for us, this is the first and most important thing, is that whoever you're going to join your life to, that they have to be someone who shares the same ultimate loyalties, the same tapestry of devotions and loyalties that you have to be shared by that person, which means, practically speaking, that Jesus has to be number one. This is also how you have a peaceful marriage, because if you have Jesus number one, if He's really your first love, then you don't place expectations upon each other that only He can fulfill. This is the downfall of so many marriages. And of a lot of, this is the only way that this woman I was telling you about was the best woman I've ever met. This is how she lived, actually. It's that she actually had a relationship with a husband first before she met her earthly husband. She was already affixed to a heavenly husband. She was betrothed to Christ. She belonged to Him. And she had expectations that only the Son of God could fulfill. And she didn't transfer them to a man. He was pretty disappointed as a man. He didn't give her much. But she had such a strong vertical connection that her horizontal didn't destroy her. Many times the horizontal pain destroys us because our vertical connection is not strong. Thank you.
It's our observation
Many young people come to us frustrated because they just can't think about themselves. They try, they work, they do all the accomplishments. They for other things they have. It almost seems that we live in a time where maybe not people live because of the miracles, finding a faithful spouse. It's almost as if even more of martyr wolves across the surface because of days of year for receiving.
Oh, gosh. Did you all hear what Father Greek said? Let me repeat it, because it's also my experience. That is that many of our young people, fantastic young people, most of the church young people who want to get married are having a hard time finding spouses. And it seems that Father is suggesting that this is a huge cross to bear, basically, and maybe even a form of minor martyrdom. I completely agree. And I would only say this, if we put the energy into cultivating our young people and their relationships and their future marriages, if we put the energy into that we put into getting them good jobs or going to a good college, we would have so much better results. Our priorities, brothers and sisters, forgive me, priorities upside down. We know what we're like. The Orthodox in America, we have very good stats. We've been researched by the best research companies like Pew. We are the most wealthy and the most educated of any Christian group in the United States of America. The most wealthy, the most educated, and I'll add a third thing that wasn't on the result, the most secular. We have the fewest colleges, uniquely Orthodox colleges. We really care about our kids going to the premier secular American university, and we're way more concerned about those things than we are about helping them find good marriages and getting started well. That has to change, absolutely has to change. Our people have always had all sorts of ways that we help our kids create relationships. We have love feasts. There's an incredible biography by one of our recent elders. His name is Haralambos from Mount Athos. And his life's in English. It's a beautiful book. I think it's called Father, just entitled Father Haralambos. And he's this incredible monk. He's one of the 12 that were under Elder Josiah, who died in 1959. And he describes a story of when he was young, trying to figure out should he be married or not, going to the weddings of all his friends. And while he said he learned how powerful the crowning was, how powerful marriage is as a sacrament. He goes, because he would be standing in their weddings and he would just feel the grace of God coming on them so powerfully, he would just cry and just weep through these marriages. I love that because it shows the best symbiosis between monastic life and marriage. And sometimes married people are really harsh on monastics, and sometimes monastics are really harsh on married. And forgive me, they're both carrot cakes. That is nonsense. Symbiosis is what God's created. There are two ways of life, and they're mutually supportive. And if you're a true monk, then you love the married state. As a matter of fact, the canons of the church say, if you're a monk because you despise the married state, you are no monk and you are a heretic. Because God is the one who made marriage. You can't become a monk because you don't like marriage. And if you're a married person and you despise monasticism, forgive me, you're a worldling. You have no sense of the next life or your dependence on the spiritual life of the monks. The church fathers say if the monks and nuns disappeared, the great judgment would come today. It's only their prayers for us that is staying the second coming and giving us an opportunity to repent. We need each other. We need to support each other. Anyway, back to Father Haralambos. Father said he went to all these marriages, and they all were contracted by the communities would have these love feasts. And he said he went to tons of them because he was thinking about getting married too. And they were hosted by parents and grandparents, and they got together with other people, and they intentionally invited all the young people in the village to come. And they cooked up a storm, and they had a great time. And everyone who was coming knew it was a super healthy, loving, familial opportunity to talk and to meet people who also were getting to that age of getting married. I've been trying to do this just in my own little village. And we've had a little bit of success. I was thinking about it last night because I spent the night at Father Timothy Pavlopoulos' who's godfather for one of my daughters. And we were, I once had him, the way that works is this, is that we get all the kids who are from 18 to 30, basically, and we announce there's going to be a love feast. And I send out a note, and I ask for people to send me something by email. So they have to send a picture and a bio. A picture and a bio. And then on a certain day, it gets cut off, a couple of weeks before the actual love feast. And then I take all the girls' pictures and bios, and I send them to all the men's emails. And I take all the boys' pictures and bios, and I send them to all the girls' emails. And then they come to my house, and then we get a speaker. So Father Timothy was actually one of the love speakers once. And we've had on average usually about 60 people come. I hosted at my house. We're packed out in there. And there's some sort of talk by some priest, etc. Anyway, we had tons of marriages. I met couples that I didn't even know who they were. They told me, I met my wife in your living room. Great! You know, they were. Those kinds of things, we have to be much more proactive to help our young people meet each other. I'm going, in a couple of weeks, I'm going to do a retreat in Washington State. And Washington State has a nice young person's fellowship, basically across the state. And these Orthodox kids, not kids, these Orthodox young adults get together once a month somewhere else in the state. Like if some speaker's coming in, they go up to Seattle, or they go down to Tacoma, or they go east, whatever. And I've been going up to Washington. This will be my 14th year in a row going up there in December to do a retreat somewhere in Washington State. And these kids move. And I've been bringing some of my kids with me recently. Last year I brought 2 of my sons. This year I'm bringing my oldest unmarried daughter who's 22 and one of her friends who's 25 wants to get married. And I told them, I said, look, I would definitely get up there. I would go up there and you can get exposed to this large group of these young adults or whatever. Anyway, they're coming. They'd be blessed. But we have to be proactive. We have to work. Be more concerned about that than where college they go to. Because honestly, the difference between this college and that, whatever. Unless it's Harvard or something, come on. But who their spouse is going to be, that's huge. It's huge. So we're supposed to have a break next door. What time, Father Philip, what time are we coming back from the break?
Well, I'd like to do the break too, but maybe around 20 minutes.
What do you say, Nicolette?
About a 20-minute break.
20-minute break, starting now, and we'll come back?
It's 1:40.
Okay.
We'll come back at 10.
At 10, okay. See you then.
So this was We'll see if you grab all campus. Yeah, it's nice, it's nice.
Like the campus.
Yeah, it's nice.
What's the age?
Well, we have 5 short acres. Short acres, about 182.
And some of these homes.
We have a lot of distance. Nice. But we didn't have it. We'd be forced to survive on storage. So, I'm not sure how that is. But I'm happy with the kids. The kids are listeners. So, and you never know what the buddies are. So maybe that this church. Maybe someday they'll just yeah. And I see them looking at the windows. Just crazy. I told them they went to a tour sometime. Yeah, because the kids love this.
How long has this been?
This is the first year we're autistic. Yeah, so. Yeah.
How did they find you?
Well, we had an agent that was smart. And they were really attracted because we have a house where they can practice practical living skills with kids.
Yeah.
Just in case, yeah.
So it's nice. Well,
You wanted us to go somewhere?
Let's get you a little something. By the way,
You know what? Father, I'm not sitting with unction. Yeah.
great us, piece of the middle. Really? Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.